Have you ever felt like you're carrying wisdom that nobody else seems to understand, and it costs you more than it rewards you? That's the life of a Sigma INFJ, the rarest personality type combined with the most independent archetype. In today's video, we're diving into 10 lessons Sigma INFJs had to learn the hard way. And trust me, some of these lessons are controversial, because when you live as both an INFJ and a Sigma, your greatest strengths often turn into your biggest struggles. Let's dive in. First thing first, being misunderstood is the norm, not the exception. Sigma INFJs live in a world where misunderstanding follows them like a shadow. From childhood, they often felt different, too quiet, too observant, too deep for the shallow games others seem to play with ease. Instead of being praised for their insight, they were labeled as weird, aloof, or even arrogant. But the truth is, they weren't trying to be mysterious. They were simply existing in a way that most people couldn't interpret. Their independence makes them seem detached, as if they don't need anyone, while their intensity often scares people who prefer small talk over real conversations. Add to this their intuition, which lets them see through lies and facades, and suddenly people don't know how to handle them. To the Sigma INFJ, it feels like walking around with a spotlight that only they can see, always aware, but rarely understood. The painful lesson here is that being misunderstood isn't a rare occurrence, it's the default setting of their lives. At first, Sigma INFJs try to explain themselves, to fit in, to tone down their depth just to be accepted. But eventually, they learn that no amount of explanation will change the fact that most people simply cannot perceive life the way they do. And this realization is both heartbreaking and liberating. Heartbreaking because they long for connection and acceptance, yet find so little of it. Liberating because once they stop expecting others to get it, they finally start living authentically. They stop watering themselves down and begin embracing their uniqueness, even if it means walking alone. And next up, isolation isn't always healing. For most people, taking time alone feels like a reset button, a quick escape from the noise of life. And for INFJs, solitude has always been a natural refuge. But Sigma INFJs push this much further. They don't just take breaks from the world, they retreat from it entirely. At first it feels like peace, silence, control, and the comfort of their own thoughts. But over time they discover a painful truth. Isolation doesn't always heal. Sometimes it hurts more than the chaos they were running from. Sigma INFJs often isolate because the world drains them. Shallow conversations exhaust them. Fake personalities frustrate them, and constant noise feels like poison to their sensitive system, so they pull back, they retreat, and at first the solitude feels like medicine. But as days turn into weeks, that solitude becomes a prison. Instead of healing, they begin to feel hollow. Instead of finding themselves, they start losing touch with reality, and the very inner world they cherished turns into an echo chamber of overthinking. The lesson here is harsh. Solitude is powerful only when it's balanced. Too little of it, and they burn out from the demands of others. Too much of it, and they spiral into detachment, loneliness, and even depression. The Sigma INFJ eventually learns that isolation is not the cure, it's only a tool. They must step back into the world even if it feels messy to find true growth, and this is where the controversy comes in. Many people glamorize solitude, preaching that being alone is the ultimate path to self-discovery. But Sigma INFJs know better. They've lived the dark side of too much aloneness. They've realized that healing doesn't come from hiding away forever. It comes from learning when to step back and when to step forward. That balance is what saves them, not endless retreat. Third on the list, empathy can become self-destruction. At first glance, empathy looks like the ultimate gift. Sigma INFJs can walk into a room and instantly feel what others are going through: joy, sadness, anger, or even the pain that no one dares to admit out loud. It's almost like having emotional X-ray vision, but what sounds like a superpower quickly reveals its darker side. Without limits, empathy turns into a weapon, one that Sigma INFJs unknowingly aim at themselves. They learn this lesson the hard way. They become the friend everyone leans on, the secret keeper, the shoulder to cry on, the person who never says no. And while they're pouring out energy for others, they often don't notice their own tank running on empty. The result? Burnout, resentment, and sometimes even physical illness. Their bodies scream for rest, while their hearts still ache for everyone else's suffering. The cruel reality is that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. By constantly absorbing pain, they lose track of what belongs to others and what belongs to themselves. They start carrying weights that were never theirs to begin with. And this is where the wake-up call happens. If they don't protect their own energy, they cannot protect anyone else's. This realization shifts everything. Sigma INFJs begin to understand that saying no isn't cruel, it's necessary. That pulling back doesn't mean they don't care, it means they're finally caring for themselves. And this is controversial because society often glorifies self-sacrifice as the highest form of love. But Sigma INFJs learn the opposite. The only way to truly help others is to stop destroying themselves in the process. What they once thought was their greatest strength, endless empathy, becomes their greatest lesson. They must choose to channel it wisely or risk being consumed by it entirely. Fourthly, people don't value depth until it's gone. Sigma INFJs crave depth like oxygen. They want conversations that matter, connections that go beyond surface-level small talk, and relationships built on authenticity instead of pretense. But here's the hard reality they've learned. Most people don't want depth. They want convenience, entertainment, and comfort. And when a Sigma INFJ offers something deeper, it often feels overwhelming or too much for others. This rejection cuts deep. Imagine pouring your soul into a friendship or relationship, sharing your truest thoughts, your raw emotions, your vision of life, only to be told you're being dramatic, intense, or overcomplicated. Over time, Sigma INFJs learn that their depth is often seen as a burden rather than a gift. People enjoy their presence, but they rarely appreciate the gravity of what they bring to the table. But then comes the turning point. The moment a Sigma INFJ withdraws, when they stop reaching out, stop sharing, stop investing, that's when people suddenly realize what they've lost. The silence feels heavier than any words. The absence of depth creates a void that shallow connections can't fill. And by the time others notice, the Sigma INFJ has usually moved on, unwilling to return to a space where they weren't valued in the first place. The controversial truth here is that depth is rarely appreciated while it's freely given. It only gains value in its absence. And this becomes one of the most painful lessons Sigma INFJs carry. They can't force people to recognize their worth. They can only choose where to place their energy. In the end, this hard lesson transforms them. Instead of wasting their depth on people who dismiss it, they begin reserving it for the rare few who truly understand and cherish it. Because once you've learned that people don't value depth until it's gone, you stop giving it away so freely and start treating it like the treasure it really is. Fifthly, boundaries are more important than love. For a long time, Sigma INFJs believed love was enough to hold everything together. They thought that if they gave enough, sacrificed enough, or poured themselves fully into someone, love would overcome any obstacle. But the reality they learned, often painfully, is that love without boundaries is not love at all. It's self-erasure. They've seen this firsthand in friendships, family ties, and romantic relationships. They gave their time, energy, and emotional strength believing loyalty would keep things balanced. Instead, they found themselves drained, taken for granted, and sometimes even manipulated. The hard truth is that love can blind Sigma INFJs to toxicity. And without boundaries, what starts as compassion can quickly spiral into exploitation. This lesson forces them to redefine what love actually means. It's not sacrificing themselves until there's nothing left. It's not tolerating mistreatment because they believe the other person needs them. Real love, they discover, requires structure. Boundaries are not barriers to keep people out. They are filters that allow the right kind of love in while keeping the wrong kind out. And here's where the controversy hits. Society often romanticizes unconditional love, the idea that you should give endlessly no matter what. But Sigma INFJs realize that this kind of love destroys more than it heals. They understand now that protecting their energy isn't selfish, it's survival. A love that demands self-destruction isn't love, it's bondage. By learning this, Sigma INFJs gain a new kind of power. They stop chasing relationships where love comes at the cost of their soul. Instead, they create connections where love and respect coexist. The lesson they carry is clear. Love without boundaries will break you, but love with boundaries will build you. And once they embrace this, they never settle for less again. 6 on the list. Their silence speaks louder than words. Sigma INFJs aren't fans of drama. They don't enjoy endless arguments or explaining themselves over and over to people who refuse to listen. Instead of wasting energy on shouting matches, they've learned to use something far more powerful: silence. And here's the shocking part. When a Sigma INFJ goes silent, it speaks louder than any carefully crafted speech ever could. At first, their silence might look like avoidance or withdrawal, but in reality, it's a conscious choice, a statement stronger than words. It says, "I've said enough, I've given enough. Now I'll let my absence do the talking." And that silence unsettles people. It forces them to confront the weight of their own actions without the distraction of explanations or justifications. This isn't weakness. In fact, it's one of the boldest moves a Sigma INFJ can make. By refusing to engage in unnecessary battles, they reclaim their energy and flip the power dynamic completely. People expect resistance, they expect arguments, but they don't know how to respond when they're met with nothing but calm, quiet distance. And here's the psychological twist. Silence creates a void, and human beings hate voids. The people who dismissed, disrespected, or underestimated the Sigma INFJ suddenly find themselves haunted by that silence. It lingers in their mind longer than any heated response ever would. It makes them replay conversations, question their actions, and wonder what the INFJ is really thinking. This is controversial because most of society is addicted to noise, constant talking, proving, debating. But Sigma INFJs show that silence is sometimes the most powerful language of all. They've mastered the art of letting their absence say everything. And once they've learned this lesson, they stop explaining themselves to people who don't deserve the explanation, and they let their silence become their sharpest weapon. 7thly, not everyone deserves access to their world. Sigma INFJs live with an inner world so rich and layered, it feels like an entire universe hidden behind their calm exterior. Their thoughts are deep, their emotions intense, and their visions often years ahead of the people around them. But here's the painful truth they've learned over time. Not everyone deserves access to that world. In fact, giving the wrong people access can be one of the biggest mistakes they'll ever make. Early on, Sigma INFJs tend to open up too much. They believe in honesty, vulnerability, and sharing their soul with others. But what they discover is that not everyone can handle that level of truth. Some dismiss it, others mock it, and the most dangerous ones use it as ammunition later on. Each betrayal teaches the Sigma INFJ a brutal lesson. Openness without discernment invites pain. This forces them to evolve. Instead of pouring themselves into everyone, they become selective. They learn that their inner world is not a public diary, it's a sacred space. Access has to be earned, not given freely. And when they do let someone in, it's because that person has proven themselves trustworthy, consistent, and capable of appreciating the depth they carry. And here's where it gets controversial. Society often pushes the idea that being open with everyone is a sign of confidence and authenticity. But Sigma INFJs reject that. They know true authenticity isn't about oversharing, it's about protecting your essence from those who would misuse it. Guarding your soul doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. So the hard lesson is clear, not everyone deserves the keys to their inner world. Once Sigma INFJs embrace this, they stop bleeding energy on people who were only curious, never genuine. And instead, they save their depth for the rare few who are ready to enter, respect, and cherish that universe. 8thly, walking away is a superpower. For most people, walking away is one of the hardest things to do. They cling to toxic relationships, one-sided friendships, or draining environments because the fear of loss feels heavier than the pain of staying. But Sigma INFJs are different. Through heartbreak and disappointment, they've learned that walking away isn't just survival, it's their superpower. At first, this ability shocks people. When a Sigma INFJ decides a situation is no longer healthy, they don't give endless warnings or dramatic ultimatums. They simply leave, quietly, decisively, and without looking back. And once they're gone, they rarely return. That finality scares people, because deep down, they realize an INFJ's goodbye is permanent. The path to this power, though, wasn't easy. Sigma INFJs used to hold on for far too long, Out of empathy, they gave chance after chance, believing in people's potential more than their actions. They stayed in toxic situations because they couldn't stand the thought of abandoning someone. But after being drained, betrayed, and broken too many times, they finally understood the truth. Holding on was hurting them more than letting go ever could. This realization flips everything. Walking away stops being an act of cruelty and becomes an act of self-respect. It's the INFJ saying, "I will not shrink myself for your comfort. I will not sacrifice my peace for your chaos." And that lesson turns them into some of the strongest people you'll ever meet. Here's where it gets controversial. Society romanticizes endurance, staying no matter what, proving loyalty at all costs. But Sigma INFJs know that staying in the wrong place is not loyalty, it's self-destruction. Their willingness to walk away makes them unpredictable, untouchable, and in a sense, free. And once they embrace this superpower, they stop begging for doors to stay open and start walking confidently through the ones that close. Ninthly, their vision makes them lonelier, not smarter. One of the defining traits of Sigma INFJs is their ability to see what others can't. They notice patterns, sense hidden motives, and predict outcomes long before they unfold. To them, the future often feels like a puzzle they've already solved while everyone else is still staring at the pieces. At first, this seems like an incredible gift, but the hard truth they learn is that their vision doesn't make them feel smarter, it makes them lonelier. When a Sigma INFJ warns someone about the path they're heading down, they're often brushed off as pessimistic or paranoid. Friends accuse them of overthinking. Partners call them dramatic. Colleagues think they're exaggerating, yet time and time again, the very thing they predicted eventually comes true. And while others are left shocked, the INFJ is left with a heavy silence, asking themselves, why do I always see it before anyone else, and why does no one believe me? This is where the pain cuts deepest. Their ability to see through illusions should connect them to others, but instead it isolates them. Because when you're the only one who sees the iceberg ahead, you feel crazy screaming about it while everyone else keeps dancing on the deck. By the time the collision happens, the INFJ no longer feels vindicated. They feel exhausted. And here lies the controversial truth. Being right isn't always rewarding. Sometimes it's a curse. Their foresight doesn't bring validation, it brings loneliness. It alienates them from the very people they want to protect. This forces Sigma INFJs to make a tough choice. Either stop sharing their insights, or accept that their vision will rarely be appreciated in the moment. But this lesson shapes them into something unshakable. They stop seeking approval for their insights and start trusting their intuition for themselves. They learn that their vision isn't meant to make them popular. It's meant to guide their own path. And once they embrace that, the loneliness becomes less of a burden and more of a shield, allowing them to move forward even when no one else can see what they see. Last but not least, freedom comes from breaking the INFJ savior complex. If there's one burden Sigma INFJs carry more than anything else, it's the belief that they're supposed to save everyone. From a young age, they take on the role of fixer, healer, and protector. They see someone hurting, and they step in. They sense someone lost, and they guide them. It feels like a mission, almost a calling. But here's the painful lesson. They eventually realize that this savior complex doesn't free people. It destroys them. Sigma INFJs learn this the hardest way possible. They pour themselves into others, trying to mend broken souls, fix toxic cycles, and shoulder problems that were never theirs to begin with. At first, it feels noble, but the more they give, the more they lose themselves. They find themselves in relationships where they're more therapist than partner, more caretaker than friend. And when things fall apart, as they often do, they're left depleted, questioning why their love and effort were never enough. This is where the breakthrough happens. They realize that saving everyone isn't their purpose, and it never was. People can only heal themselves when they're ready, no matter how much support they're given. By constantly stepping in, the INFJ actually robs others of the chance to grow on their own. And worse, they destroy their own spirit in the process. The controversial truth is this: not every battle is theirs to fight. Not every person is theirs to save. By breaking free from the savior complex, Sigma INFJs reclaim their freedom. They stop measuring their worth by how much they fix others and start valuing themselves for simply existing. They redirect that energy inward, and for the first time, they feel light, untethered, and authentically free. This is the ultimate transformation. They go from self-sacrificing martyrs to self-empowered visionaries. The lesson is clear. The world doesn't need them to save everyone. It needs them to be whole, alive, and true to themselves. And once they learn that, Sigma INFJs finally step into the freedom they were searching for all along. And those are 10 lessons Sigma INFJs learned the hard way. Now, here's the question. Which of these lessons hit you the hardest? And if you're not a Sigma INFJ, which one shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because remember, sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that set us free.